And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
You believe he just said that? Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. Thank you for joining me today. When we come back, what are the implications of Mark Carney saying this? We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please like the station now if you can, because it helps us beat the suppression that I'm under every day from YouTube. Talk about policy and ideas on this, and sometimes you get some trouble. And subscribe. We're almost hitting 40,000. Not much compared to a lot of those folks out there who are just way past me, but we're doing our best. And I promise you to always deliver the news in a way that's objective, fair, balanced to some degree, but more so truthful. I always will tell you the truth, and I won't lie to you. So thank you for subscribing. Resubscribe if you must. We lose subscribers all the time. They don't even know it. So make sure you are subscribed to the station. Appreciate it so much. Going to listen to this again because, and I'll give you the context in a second.
I gotta say, and something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans. I gotta say.
So incredible stuff. Now, Mark Carney's not even prime minister. Somebody pointed this out in the comments section already. He's not even prime minister. And if he does become prime minister, he will be an unelected prime minister without even a seat in the House of Commons. This man has never stood for public office. He's been appointed to everything, including $1 million a year job as the governor of the Bank of England. Yeah, it was a £750,000 a year job that he defended because he was such an economic genius. Disputed, by the way, by a lot of folks who remember him as the guy who couldn't stop spending and printing money, printing the pound. He was a pound printer, and that's what he did best. Encourage you, by the way, to read my Substack column. I've got another one going up today, but your support on my Substack is much appreciated. A lot of the stuff is free. I encourage you to become a paid member. That means so much because this is basically 90% of my work now is on Substack and YouTube. And I appreciate your support so much. But this is an article about being Mark Carney. Of course, the connection is to that movie Being There. And I hope you've seen our vignette. I'll show it again. Probably not today, but tomorrow. And this is a guy without any substance at all, who's being lauded and touted by the national media as an economic genius, as such a nice guy. But, you know, as I pointed out in the comments this morning, this guy is not likable at all. He is not the least bit likable. People say Pierre Poilievre isn't likable. Well, compared to Pierre Poilievre, you know, Pierre Poilievre compared to this guy is Perry Como. He is completely unlikable, Mark Carney. And he comes across as a faceless bureaucrat who really doesn't give a damn except achieving his agenda. And his agenda is globalism. That's what he's here for. It's clear that's what he's here for. Now, Mark Carney has the gall to go to Kelowna. Yes, and it was Kelowna. I'll show you a bit more of that speech to announce a plan And of course, the plan is completely unbelievable. He's going to have a middle class tax cut. Well, and in a minute, we'll examine exactly how a middle class tax cut is unachievable under Mark Carney, because he's going to be taxing you in so many other different ways that even if he comes through with a middle class tax cut, it's going to be meaningless. He's also promising to balance the budget. Well, where have we heard that before? Everyone running for the office of prime minister promises to balance the budget. And he says in 3 years, remember Justin Trudeau? At least he said, hey, the budget will balance itself. Well, under Mark Carney, the budget will balance itself too, except it won't, just like it didn't under Justin Trudeau. He's also promising to build. What, at taxpayer expense? Donald Trump has promised to drill. That means more energy, more money in people's pockets, lower gas prices. Mark Carney wants to take you off of oil and gas, establish a net zero, and have a corporate carbon tax, which will scare business out of the country, and which, if they stay in the country, they'll pass on to you. But he also wants a carbon tariff. It's double taxation, and we'll explain that one in a minute. But before we get into Mark Carney's record on the last Emergencies Act, and tomorrow is the third anniversary of that, February 14th, Valentine's Day tomorrow. It's the third anniversary of Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act. So let's listen to a wee bit more of Mark Carney in Kelowna. By the way, there's not hundreds of people here. The mainstream media have reported he attracted hundreds of people in a very conservative town like Kelowna. There's a lot of intelligent people in Kelowna. Unfortunately, they weren't at this meeting because they were clapping constantly at all the dribble Mark Carney came out.
The third thing we're going to do is to ensure that there's fair competition for our companies and that we penalize high polluting foreign imports. So we're going to develop a carbon border adjustment mechanism. What that does is promote jobs here at home. It prevents carbon leakage abroad. And it aligns Canada with our allies who are still engaged in the fight against climate change.
Okay, so this is a carbon tariff. And the Globe and Mail thinks this is a great idea, by the way. Globe and Mail says, let's have a carbon tariff. Because the Globe and Mail wants Mark Carney elected. They want status quo. And this guy has the audacity to suggest, hey, this isn't going to cost you anything. It's those big polluters. Misnomer, they're not polluting. But they're going to be paying for it all. Yeah. That's going to invite retaliatory tariffs. So you will be paying for it.
Davos and the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the IMF, all of these bodies now subscribe to the same worldview. And it's a new version of socialism. That's what this is. Net zero, transgender extremism, Islamism. All of these things involve taking power away from individuals and families and businesses and instead giving the power to supranational institutions. And that is what people in the West are now rebelling against, and rightly so, because if we carried on down that path, we would be seeing the end of our civilization.
All right, that was from my interview with Liz Truss about 10 days ago. Fascinating. I encourage you to go back and watch that. We'll definitely have her on the show again. Remarkable guest. But let's listen to a bit more from this evening in Kelowna. And as I said, there's a lot of intelligent people in Kelowna who vote, other than Liberal, they vote Conservative and People's Party of Canada. It used to be a stronghold of conservative values. A lot of intelligent people there. Unfortunately, they did not attend this meeting with Mark Carney because they couldn't stop clapping at everything.
That in a crisis, plan beats no plan. You have to have a plan. It gives everybody a focus. It gives discipline. It gives energy. We have a plan for Canada which is going to deliver the strongest economy and is going to ride out the Americans until they come back.
Yeah. Keep clapping, folks.
The other thing I learned over the years, it took me a while to really grasp this, but I am a huge fan of markets in the private sector and delivery. But in the end, markets don't have values. People do. Yeah. And it's our job, often in government, is to make sure that those markets are directed to deliver for people. Now, not everyone gets that. And my opponent,
You notice he's saying my opponent? His opponent is Chrystia Freeland right now. But he's already assuming, whoops, I forgot. I shouldn't say that I've already won the leadership, that it's a coronation and that I'm the choice. And it doesn't matter how the voting goes because I'm the choice. The mainstream media has already told me I'm already elected. So his opponent is Pierre Poilievre. His opponent's not Chrystia Freeland or Karina Gould. No, he's already won the leadership race. In egomaniac Mark Carney's mind, the race is over.
I've seen this type of politician before around the world. Lifelong politicians. There's no bigger believer in the market than a lifelong politician who's never worked in the market, never made a patient, never earned it.
So first of all, he's telling you, I really believe in the markets, but we got to make the markets work for you. So in other words, massive government interference. He doesn't believe in the markets. And yes, he has to take a poke at Pierre Poilievre for spending as long as he has in the House of Commons. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a great thing either. But how dare this government appointee who's never won a single election criticize Pierre Poilievre for at least being elected to his job? And if he becomes prime minister, and when Pierre Poilievre becomes prime minister, it will be because the people decided, not because the Liberal Party hacks and insiders and party bosses decided to make Mark Carney the next prime minister. So I don't have any time for some guy who has spent his entire career getting government appointments and living off the government trough and never seeking the approval of the voters to stay there.
So the answer to every problem is to cut, destroy, reduce. The Americans, I'm trying to rationalize for a moment what's happening with them. It's not easy. I understand their opponent. But part of the reaction there is because they lost their way. They forgot about the middle class.
I'm sorry. The Americans under Donald Trump have forgotten the middle class? Who do you think elected him? This guy just cannot maintain a consistent message to save his life.
About the big hits to the middle class and the squeezes on the middle class in America. They have also let the tech giants and others run people's lives. Now they're letting them run the government. Sure. Yeah. Now they're letting them run the government. Okay. Look, there's a lot at stake right now. And a lot of it is economic, and I'm going to come to an economic response in a second. But part of it is about what they want. They want our resources. They want our water. They want our land. They would destroy our way of life. Let's just think about this for a moment. I'll look around this room. Canada is a mosaic, right? We're all Canadians here, but we all have different.
I encourage you right now, folks. Tell your friends and family about this broadcast. I am being totally suppressed this morning again. These numbers are flat. It's very frustrating. We're trying to reveal the truth about Mark Carney, And I tell you, there are people out there who don't want you to know that.
Identities that we share and we celebrate. America is a melting pot. You go there, become American, move into becoming American. It's a different way of doing things, it's not our way of doing things. You know, in America, there are no First Nations. In America, there would never be.
You know, that is ridiculous. There's no First Nations in America. Yeah, they are. There's tribes like the Cherokee, the Navajo. And you know what? They're very successful because they've been given a certain amount of autonomy and they actually are thriving on the land that they have. So unlike in Canada, where they're constantly coming to the government and saying we need more and more and more and more money so the chiefs can get rich, it's a dead issue now because the First Nations in the United States have gotten on with their lives, prospered, made money, and looked after themselves. Mark Carney loves the cradle to death welfare state.
French language right. Jamais les droits de langue en français.
Yes, okay, and yes, there's...
Be New Orleans. Be Louisiana, pas Quebec.
And this is the drivel that comes from this man. He has got nothing to say. Absolutely nothing to say. Now, where was Mark Carney during the invocation of the Emergencies Act? Well, how about that? The Liberals, Justin Trudeau, during the last Emergencies Act 3 years ago tomorrow, and I remember this day because I was there when Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act, and I was there when the force of the police came down on us. I remember it very well. And I'm gonna find a clip here with Trudeau promising us, of course, that this was not going to be upsetting to anybody. And we'll get that here.
After discussing with Cabinet and caucus, after consultation with premiers from all provinces and territories, after speaking with opposition leaders, the federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
Okay, the blockade was over when he invoked the Emergencies Act. You remember? There he is with his coiffed hair, surrounded by his tyrannical ministers with their face masks on. Do you remember this happening? And it was because the protests were illegal. They weren't.
I want to be very clear. The scope of these measures will be time-limited, geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate to the threats they are meant to address. The Emergencies Act will be used to strengthen and support law enforcement agencies at all levels across the country. This is about keeping Canadians safe, protecting people's jobs, and restoring confidence in our institutions. These tools include strengthening their ability to impose fines or imprisonment. The government will designate, secure, and protect places and infrastructure that are critical to our economy and people's jobs, including border crossings and airports. We cannot and will not allow illegal and dangerous activities to continue. The Emergencies Act will also allow the government to make sure essential services are rendered, for example, in order to tow vehicles blocking roads. And finally, it will enable the RCMP to enforce municipal bylaws and provincial offences where required. We're not using the Emergencies Act to call in the military. We're not suspending fundamental rights or overriding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We are not limiting people's freedom of speech. We are not limiting freedom of peaceful assembly. We are not preventing people from exercising their right to protest.
Lie, 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 lie. They did infringe upon our freedom of speech. He did infringe upon our freedom to protest. He did infringe upon our freedom of assembly. He lied about everything. This was an unnecessary, tyrannical exercise in egotism and narcissism by a prime minister without any merit whatsoever.
Legally, we'll always defend the rights of Canadians to peaceful assembly and to freedom of expression, but these blockades...
And they did nothing to defend Canadians' right to peaceful protest and expression, because that's what the Freedom Convoy was all about. And I saw it every day. But Trudeau lied. Please share this broadcast with your friends and family. We're getting totally whopped today, or whapped today, however you want to put it, by the powers that be. And it's incredible what is going on with censorship because of this topic. So you heard Trudeau say we're not going to involve the military. Well, they sure as heck thought about it, didn't they? Look at this. This is Mark Carney. How many tanks are you asking for? I just want to ask Anita how many we've got on hand. Anita Anand was the defense minister at the time, and they were pushing Anita Anand to bring tanks into the process, even though Justin Trudeau said, oh, the military's not going to get involved in this. Absolute nonsense. They wanted the military involved. And it came very close to bringing tanks into this. Can you imagine the Tiananmen Square moment with protesters standing in front of a Canadian Army tank on what, Spark Street or Wellington Street? Can you imagine that moment? That would have been emblematic of the tyranny Justin Trudeau brought down on people. And Mark Carney was 100% behind that tyranny, and he wants to do it again. Do you understand this? He wants to do it again. We're not being alarmist. He said so in Kelowna last night. He wants to invoke the Emergencies Act, the emergency powers of the federal government, to push through his agenda, to punish the United States, but to punish more so Canadians who disagree with him. That's what Mark Carney wants to do. He wants to use the Emergencies Act. This will be the Emergencies Act 2.0. And here's Mark Carney writing in his very favorite newspaper, the Globe and Mail, which right now, as I said, is advocating for Mark Carney's policies on a tariff, a carbon tariff. The Globe and Mail is 100% behind that. They have been arguing this for the last week. There's been opinion piece after opinion piece arguing that Canada needs a carbon tariff, another tax. And look, it's time to end the Freedom Convoy, Mark Carney said on February 7th, 2022, exactly 1 week before Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act. Mark Carney said it's time to end the Freedom Convoy by enforcing the law and following the money. What? And following the money? What? Back to those people who donated? What does follow the money mean for Mark Carney? It means freezing the bank accounts of people who donated or supported the Freedom Convoy. That's what follow the money means for Mark Carney. This is a man who is so incredibly deceptive. Now, of course, he's like Pierre Pauli of light. Now, of course, he's a reasonable man. He wants a middle-class tax cut. BS. You'll never see a tax cut from Mark Carney. You'll never see anything reasonable from Mark Carney. It just gets better. What did Stephen Ledrew, the former president of the Liberal Party, have to say about Mark Carney? Mark Carney is a wickedly dangerous man. Basically what I said this morning. He is a dangerous man, hoping to curtail individual freedom in order to achieve his view of what the world needs. He makes the WEF, World Economic Forum, look like libertarians. Now that is Stephen Ledrew talking about this man. And that, my friend, is extremely frightening. Just as an aside here, this is quite interesting. Remember Chrystia Freeland? Yeah, she was the former finance minister, former deputy prime minister, and she's actually running against Mark Carney, you might recall. Mark Carney never talks about her because as far as Mark Carney's concerned, she doesn't exist. There's no race. He's already won the race. The race is between himself and Pierre Poilievre. And he's already prime minister. He's already acting like prime minister, going on U.S. talk shows, being interviewed by CNN, being interviewed all across North America as the obvious prime minister who's just biding his time until Trudeau pulls the plug entirely. But Mark Carney's not running against Chrystia Freeland. No. Mark Carney is running against Pierre Poilievre. But Chrystia Freeland still thinks there's a race. And guess who just endorsed Chrystia Freeland? Randy Boissonnault. Yeah, the cabinet minister who's always complaining about being so hated by everybody. The cabinet minister who said he's up all night long talking to those trans kids because of those horrible policies and legislation in Alberta against gender affirming care. So Randy's supporting Chrystia. Well, I'm not sure Mark Carney actually wanted his support, but excuse my phone going on. And that's what happened here. Anyway, I've got another one for you because this is absolutely beautiful, and we'll get to Daniel Smith in a second. But did you know Jagmeet Singh? In fact, I was going to have a guy on the show yesterday who was going to tell me the exact opposite of this, that Jagmeet Singh is not preparing for a fall election or a spring or an early election. But apparently, according to a leaked document, Jagmeet Singh now wants to have an early election, according to internal memo. But so is this? Here's what I think is going on here with Jagmeet Singh. He's playing both sides of the coin as usual. On the one hand, he's pretending, well, I really want to bring down this government, but not yet, because we have to vote for these measures if the tariffs come through. His caucus is on the verge of throwing him out because he is so frustrating to deal with. Every time he gets in front of a camera and says, yeah, we're going to vote again, we're going to bring down the government as soon as possible, all cards are on the table, but as soon as he says the but, his caucus just about goes crazy because this guy doesn't know what he wants to do from one day to the next. I was going to read from this story, but I'm running out of time here. This is fascinating. A Ledrew poll. Carney, as leader, would have Liberals tied with Conservatives. Do I believe that? No. Do I think the Conservative support is that soft? That this mannequin named Mark Carney would take all of Poilievre's support away in a matter of weeks? By what? Promising to use the Emergencies Act? I don't buy it for a minute. If you look at this poll, it's not even scientific. It's not a scientific poll. It is basically calling people responding. It's about as scientific as the polls that I'm putting up. I don't pretend they're scientific. When I get 98% people responding that they want Pierre Poilievre to win, I don't think that's representative of the entire Canadian population. And I don't pretend it is. However, this Ledrew poll doesn't really indicate at the beginning that it really can't be taken too seriously. Do I really believe that Pierre Poilievre has been dropped like a hot potato by the majority of voters? That he's tied, the Conservative Party is tied now with Mark Carney? No, I don't. I don't believe that. And I think there's a lot of, I hate to use the word disinformation and misinformation in polling right now, but I do believe there is. And I think it's quite evident. Let's turn, Danielle Smith's been going through some hard times lately. Let's not forget the hard work she's done and is doing to stave off these tariffs from Donald Trump.
He's working. I think that the fact that we got a 30-day reprieve was because we agreed to work on the cross-border problem of fentanyl. I was pleased to see the federal government announced a fentanyl czar, and my administration has already been in touch with him to talk about how in Alberta we can lend to the success of those efforts. So what I would say is what I've seen from this president is that he is prepared to make a deal. We've made a deal on that. I think we can make a deal on steel and aluminum by making very much the same argument that I've been making on energy and critical minerals. We've won the argument that those raw materials are essential to American success. It comes in, it makes value-added products, it creates good American jobs, it creates good American products that we buy back. Same thing for aluminum. They just do not make enough for their defense industry, their auto industry, and their critical needs. So I think aluminum, we can make the very same argument, and on steel, we buy as much steel products from them as they buy from us.
Premier Smith, when did you become aware of concerns over contracts at AHS, and do you think the RCMP should be called?
Well, I'm glad that we're going to have the Auditor General take a look at it. I first became aware of it when I saw the newspaper reporting on it. And we're interested in hearing what the Auditor General has to say. We've already set up a shared file so that they can get all of the documents that we have to see if there is any wrongdoing. If there's wrongdoing, we'd like to get to the bottom of it. And if there isn't, we need to find out why AHS is standing in the way of charter surgical centers. How
did you not know what your chief of staff was up to if the allegations were true?
Well, we've been asking for 8 months for any, as I understand it, from my health minister, for any indication of wrongdoing. We've not seen any. So I think we have to see if there's any wrongdoing first. And if there is, then we have to clean it up.
Do you still have confidence? Do you still have confidence in your health minister? Do you still have confidence in your health minister?
I still have confidence in my health minister.
Okay, so the Premier said they have on to the next meeting.
On USMCA, it has to be renegotiated. I think we have to remember we've got two sets of tariffs. This first tariff was about dealing with the fentanyl crisis, and I think that we have satisfied the president that we're working on that. The second round of tariffs will come with the renegotiation of USMCA. And I think the sooner we get a government with a 4-year mandate, the sooner we can open that up and solve the broader range of tariff issues.
Yes.
Crane?
The sooner we can get a government with a 4-year mandate. Key. And let's not forget, all we're going through right now, all of the BS that's coming out of Mark Carney's mouth. Let's have an election. Let's put him up against what we have to offer. Because I tell you, Mark Carney is not a likable individual. He doesn't have anything to say except the platitudes that anyone running for prime minister would repeat. I'm going to cut your taxes. I'm going to balance the budget. I'm going to build homes. Where have we heard that before? Well, from Justin Trudeau. And of course, while he's promising to cut middle-class taxes, he's taxing us to death with other taxes. But I saved this for last because a lot of you are saying what I've said for the last couple of years, that we need to end the war in Ukraine. And we're on the verge of doing that. It looks like the U.S. is going to help broker a peace deal. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth talked about this yesterday. And he said, look, it's not going to be the borders of pre-2022. It's not going to be Ukraine cannot join NATO. No, they can't. That's a fact of life. But Justin Trudeau is so stupid, so delusional, that he thinks Ukraine, which is literally on the verge of collapse, it hasn't got anybody left to fight the Russians. It's selling its military supplies to drug cartels. It can't keep this going much longer. It's no position to dictate any peace accord. it is no more able to dictate the terms of peace than Germany was in 1945 when it got rolled over by Russia. Ukraine cannot talk about how it's going to dictate any peace terms. It will not be a part of NATO. The borders will shift. And Zelensky is the most corrupt president in Eastern Europe. And Ukraine is the most corrupt regime in Eastern Europe. And for Justin Trudeau to suggest this has anything to do with democracy or freedom or liberty or legality is insane. But let's listen to Justin make it up as he goes along.
Ukraine, the U.S. Defense Secretary earlier said that it's not correct to think that we're going to get to go back to the borders of Ukraine in 2014. Would you say that the battle has been lost?
One of the things Canada has been very clear about is that it is only Ukrainians that get to decide what is acceptable to them as an outcome of any peace negotiations. Obviously, people will have different perspectives around strategies, around positionings, but for us, it's very simple. Ukrainians are busy defending their sovereignty, their democracy. They're busy standing up for the rule of law as it applies in all of our democracies. Ukrainians get to decide what the outcome of that peace process must be.
So Justin Trudeau wants to see more Ukrainians dead. He wants to see the war continue indefinitely. He wants to keep sending arms and billions of dollars to Ukraine to keep the war going. I'm sorry, it's not going to keep going. It's over. The war will soon be over, Justin. And it's not going to go the way you wanted it. It's not going to go, the peace agreement is not going to happen the way you just predicted. It's not going to go anything like you imagine it because you have nothing to do with the outcome. Your word doesn't matter. You're a laughingstock in the international scene to begin with. And this war is not going to end the way you planned it. Your buddy boy Zelensky is probably going to take off with his Swiss bank accounts and all of his loot and leave the country. And that's what you seem to think is democracy and legality. But we need this war to end. We need Ukrainians to stop dying. We need Russians to stop dying. We need peace in the area. Donald Trump is committed to that. Pete Hegseth announced that yesterday. We're moving forward with peace, despite Justin Trudeau's desire to move forward with war. We need this war to end. And Pierre Poilievre needs to shut up about how much he wants Ukraine to win this war when that is no longer even a distant option. Pierre Poilievre needs to say a peace deal is available. Let's have peace in Ukraine. We need Pierre Poilievre to stop pitching for Justin Trudeau on this issue, to stop trying to keep the war going, because it's all about politics for both of them, for Trudeau and Poilievre. It's about politics. Pierre Poilievre needs to focus on a tremendous job that he needs to do on domestic affairs to bring Canada back from the edge of economic catastrophe, to make Canada great again. That's where Pierre Poilievre has to focus his attention, his abilities, his expertise, and his enthusiasm. And that's what I expect to hear this Saturday at the Rogers Centre in Ottawa. I'll be there reporting live, and I'll have subsequent reports up on this station, on the Post Millennial, and elsewhere. But don't miss that event Saturday, February 15th at the Rogers Centre, beginning at 1 o'clock. Go to the Conservative Party Canada website to register so you can be there. Find out where this party is going and how we can stop Mark Carney from continuing to degrade Canada any further. Thank you for watching today, folks. God bless you. I'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need to know. And let's keep on fighting and resolving to resist.